Welcome back. In our last lesson, we talked about the Pythagorean theorem and its converse, and how right triangles have a special situation between the lengths of the sides. So in this lesson, we're going to actually use that Pythagorean theorem to solve some problems. So here we go. Let's jump in. Our first example is parasailing. It says find the height of the parasailer above the surface of the water. So we have this nice little picture here. We have somebody parasailing, and we want to find the length of that leg of the right triangle. Okay, so we're given the hypotenuse is 200 and one of the legs is 135, so that should follow the Pythagorean theorem. So here's our Pythagorean theorem. So which numbers go in which spot? Well, remember, the main thing is to get that the hypotenuse is the longest one. That has to be assigned to the position of c squared. So c squared is going to be 200 squared equals, we're looking for a squared, and b squared will be 135 squared. Some pretty big numbers here when you punch them in on your calculator. So 200 squared gives us 40,000. 135 squared is 18,225. Now, how do we get a squared by itself? Well, this big number is being added to it, so we want to do the opposite and subtract it. And whatever we do to one side of an equal sign, we have to do to the other. So we're subtracting minus 18,225 from both sides, leaving us with a squared equals 21,775. Well, how do we get a squared to be just a? We want to know what a is equal to. And we do that by taking the square root of both sides. I want you to make sure that you remember that the inverse operation of squaring is taking the square root. And whatever we do to one side, we must do to the other, right? So we're going to take the square root of both sides, and we get a is equal to plus and minus square root of 21,775, which on your calculator will give you 148. Would it make any sense to have a negative distance in this case? It would not. So therefore, we're going to throw that answer out. Even though we recognize there are two answers, the one that makes sense is 148, the positive value. Here's one for you to check on your own. Pause the video, see if you can come up with the length of side D, and I'll show you when you get back. Alrighty, let's take a look at this one. So this one, our equation should be d squared is equal to 7 squared plus 10 squared, right? This one's pretty straightforward, not too bad. So d squared is equal to, what is 7 squared? That's 49. 10 squared is 100. So when we add those together, we get d squared equals 149. So how do I undo a d squared? Well, that's taking the square root, and whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I end up with d equals plus and minus the square root of 149. And what is that equal to? D then is equal to plus or minus the square root of 149. Let me just punch that in, and I get 12.2. You can just go to the nearest tenth. Yeah, it did tell us that in our directions. Plus and minus 12.2. So in this case, we don't want negative distances, so we're going to throw out the negative, and we're just going to keep the positive value of 12.2. Here's another one. Let's check this one out. It says if the rise of the stairs of a building is 5 feet, so the rise is going up and down, it's rising 5 feet, and the run is 12 feet, how long is it from point A to point B? Well, basically they're asking us to use the Pythagorean theorem and find the hypotenuse of the right triangle, right? So it's like this one would be A, this could be B, and this could be C. Okay, so my equation will be c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. And we don't know what c is, so that's what we're solving for. A in this case is 5, so we're going to have 5 and we're going to square it. And we're going to add to that 12 squared. So what is 5 squared? 5 squared is 25. 12 squared is 144. And when we add those two numbers together, we get 169. So now to find c, we need to take the square root of both sides. So we get c equals plus and minus the square root of 169. So c is equal to plus and minus 13. And again, it doesn't make any sense to have a negative value. We're going to throw out the negative value in this case, and we're going to use positive 13. So that'll be 13 feet from point A to point B. There we go. A circular lawn sprinkler. So here we have a lawn sprinkler right in the center with a range of 25 feet. Okay, so it goes out 25 feet when it sprays. Is placed 20 feet from the edge of a lawn. So here's the lawn's edge right here. Find the length of the section of the lawn's edge that is within range of the sprinkler. They're asking us to find this leg right here of this right triangle. Okay, so we have one leg is 20, we have the hypotenuse is 25, we're looking for the length x. Okay, so let's go ahead and write an equation. So we're going to get a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Now, what do we know and what do we not know? I'm going to call, and actually, instead of a squared, I'm going to call that x squared, okay, because we're actually looking for the variable x. So let me erase that and just make that an x. I think that'll make more sense. Let's call it x squared. We're looking for x, so we're going to have x squared plus, now b in this case is 20, and c in this case is 25. So let's take a look at what we get. So x squared plus 20 squared is 400 is equal to 25 squared. And what is 25 squared? Well, that one is 625. Well, how do we solve this? What's happening to x squared? Well, x squared has 400 added to it. So we're going to need to subtract 400 from it. And whatever we do to one side of an equation, we must do to the other. So I'm going to subtract 400 from both sides. So x squared plus 400 and minus 400 add to 0. So we get x squared by itself is equal to, what is 625 minus 400? Well, that's 225. And our last step now is to take the square root of both sides. So we get x equal to plus and minus the square root of 225, which is equal to plus and minus. The square root of 225 is 15. So therefore, x up here is, if x is equal to 15 feet, the question asks us, find the length of the section of the lawn's edge that is within range of the sprinkler. So each one of these is 15 feet. So the total distance here, right, would be, whoops, I made that go a little too far. So you have x and x. So our total distance or total length is equal to 30 feet, right? So make sure you go back and look at what it's asking you. The length of the section of the lawn's edge that is within range of the sprinkler. So it's this 15 feet here, but it's also another 15 feet over here because it's this whole edge of the lawn. Here's a chance for you to check your understanding and apply the Pythagorean theorem. Go ahead and work on these 3 problems and bring your answers to class. We'll see you next time.